Hello and welcome everyone. So for today's lesson, if you were not here last week, we're doing just a very quick summary recap of things that you're going to need to do and just some of the basics. Um, if you are here, that means that you have been into the classroom, and so I just want to catch you up on a couple of things that you've missed. There is a student information sheet in the Google Forms that you will need to go ahead and fill out and submit. If you've already done this, don't worry about it. You don't have to fill it out, but if you have not yet, this will count as a grade. This is a completion grade, so it doesn't, you need to answer as honestly as you can, but this is just, you do it, you get the grade. If you don't, then you're going to end up getting a 0. Then I do also have a Padlet that I'm going to bring that into the grades as well. And when you go to this Padlet, you need to sign in. If you don't sign in, then where like your name comes up as anonymous. So here's one. I don't know who this belongs to, so I don't know who to give the grade to, and so you need to somehow put your name. You need to go ahead and put your name into it. In the case of Amari here, it's listed as anonymous, but then he did put his name in here. And the three main things is you put down 3 things that you expect as far as online etiquette when it comes to an online class, and then from there we'll fix and I will summarize these main rules. The schedule is in here, and so if you're in my first period, you need to be online at 8 o'clock. If you're in here just a little bit after, I got to give it a little bit of leeway, but ultimately you need to be in here at 8 o'clock. If you're coming in at 8:15, then that's definitely going to be tardy, if not just considered absent for the day. I have planning during the second period, so if you're in my third period, you need to be here at 11:45. Notice that the lunch for all students and staff is from 10:40 to 11:45. And if you're in my fourth period, we start at 1:05. And then I am supposed to be done by the various times. So first period, I'm done by 8:50, 12:35 for third, and 1:55 for fourth. On Wednesdays, this is for all days except for Wednesdays. On Wednesdays, and instead of doing 50 minutes initially, we do only 30. And this is no live instructions. This is you log in for assistance. So this is help on homeworks, helps on projects, any kind of if you need extra things to to help bring up your grade and so on. That'll be Wednesdays are dedicated, are going to be dedicated for that. There's also a journal, a journal lab format that we're going to be keeping for when we do major projects. You go here and you click on this link, and it will make you have a copy of this in your Google Drive, and we'll be filling those out whenever we do our larger projects. There is an activity link where I sent. You go to it's an app. It's online. It requires a Flash player. And if you complete the goal, which is to have 4 objects based off of particular constraints, object 1 has a mass of 2,000, object 2 mass of 50, object 3 is a mass of 1, and object 4 is a mass of 0.1. You have to get these orbiting each other for 300 seconds without crashing. And I did finally, I spent a lot of time working on it, and I was able to make this work. And if you were to complete that and you were to fill out in this this report how you did it, so that way I could recreate your steps, then this is something I can look into for some extra credit and go from there. So that catches up on a lot of the stuff that we did last week. So now let's move on over into the lesson.
All right, so let's get into this. So this is the Technology and Engineering Design course. So we are using the Engineering by Design textbook by the ITEEA, and so you may also hear me refer to it as the Foundations of Technology, and it is the same course. So when you see Foundations of Technology pop up, and it is fine for this Technology Engineering Design class, which I may also refer to as TED. Also, now that I've got more of you here, a couple of things to note. I'm doing a lot of this in one take. And so if there's pauses and things like that, this isn't going to be quite as fine-tuned as some of my other work that I've done before. Also, I have 3 cats, one of which is old and very loud. So if you happen to hear a cat or one of my 2 daughters in the background or something like that, please forgive me. But let's just dive on in and let's go from here. So in our first unit, we're looking at technological inventions and innovations. And more specifically today, we're looking at the history of technology. So technology, first things that I want to say about technology is almost anything that is inorganic, almost anything that was made was technology at one point in time. So the idea of technology being, digital, electronic, augmented reality, virtual reality, computer-based, and all of that kind of stuff, you have to kind of get that out of your head for a little bit and just remember that anytime we're talking about an advancement of something, that at one point in time was its own technology. So what's the big idea? The big idea for today's lesson is that people are better able to understand the world around them when they explore how people of all times and places use their unique skills to develop inventions and innovations. So this is some things that we're just going to be going throughout this course. This class is not just for people who are good at computers. This class is not just good for people who are mechanically inclined. Everybody has their own unique set of skills that drives innovation and invention, and in different realms and for different things. People who were good at making cars better were not necessarily the same people who were great at building airplanes or computers or the food industry. So just keep that in mind as we're going through these. If you don't see your particular skill set in here, it may just be because we're not, I'm not mentioning it, but it's all together. We all work together to advance society, and so we are all part of a technological movement. So the development, and I've already kind of mentioned this a little bit, technology is evolutionary. So it's been around since human beings have been around, and it's a series of refinements to an idea or invention. Odds are, if you create something, you're not creating something that is brand new. Instead, you are modifying things that came before. Bill Gates did not invent the computer. The computer has actually been around in some way, shape, or form, depending on how you wish to define it, for even thousands of years, just not in the digital format that we're used to. The one that I think of when I go through this, as I think of, this is going to age me a little bit here, but I remember the first video game system. There was the Atari 2600 that was out, and we had Asteroids, a little triangle that was shooting the polygons on the screen, and you had Pong, and that was just the coolest thing ever. And then the Nintendo Entertainment System, the original one, Super Mario Brothers, came out for the home console. And then from there, we moved into things like the Sega Genesis. Computer games became more relevant. Then you get into the modern day gaming systems. There's the GameCube and some of these others, the handhelds, and they just kept building on the technologies that had come before them. And then you get into the Xbox and the PlayStations and all of their new iterations, and until finally, we have the games that we have today. In front of me, you can't see it. The very first digital camera that I had a memory card that was 16 megabytes, and I have sitting right beside it, and I'll take a picture of these and put them up in the classroom. I have sitting right beside it a flash card, which is maybe 3-4 times as thick, but about the same size, that has a terabyte of memory. And and they didn't just go from the 16 megabytes to the terabyte. It was, over time they got more and more and more, to where something that's about 4 times as thick holds so much more memory. It would take, I did the math, it would take about 62,500 of those memory sticks to have the same amount of memory as the one flash drive. So it's refinement. It gets better and better over time. The evolution of civilization has been directly attributed to the development of tools and materials. As each invention happens, it causes the society to be able to, be more efficient and to be able to do better. And then the better that the nation, that the society can do, the more that they are able to put their influence on the world. That's why, these major countries, not companies, our first world nations invest so much into research and development of new tools, new ideas, and to continue to put their influence on a global society. There's countless examples of where a nation or group developed something new that gave them such an advantage that they were able to go out and and rule almost unimpeded. And those are some things that we're going to be kind of looking at. Not that we, and I'll get into that more later. So impact of technological development can be divided into 4 major categories. Now this is by the categories of this course. You could divide them up into different methods if you chose and kind of view it in your own way. You may have more than 4, you may say less than 4. But for the purposes of this class, these are the 4 that we're looking at. The social, which is the impact on the people. Political, the impact on policies and laws. Cultural, impact on human achievements. And then the economic, the impact of the economy. So something to think about is, last week, and one of the assignments I asked you to think about your favorite technology and think about its impact. We're going to revisit that as an assignment. We're going to revisit that as an assignment and look at, okay, now let's take a look at that technology and how has it impacted a society in these 4 realms. So when we talk about technology, where do we start? And early in the history of technology, the development of tools and materials was based on technological know-how. So we're going, way back in the human evolution process, where what separated humans from the other animal and primitive species at the time. And for many anthropologists and scientists agree that it was the development of tools. And but now when we look at technology, and I've already kind of alluded to this, the development is based on scientific knowledge and engineering design. So we're not talking about you're making a new tool. The hammer has already been invented, and instead we're finding ways to advance our most any advancement goes through a very rigorous process of fine-tuning all of these different things that we have at our disposal. So as far as the history, we're going to look at, and we're not going to go into too much detail. Every one of these is a course in of itself. But we're going to look very, very, very briefly in this lesson about the 9 different periods of time: Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze, Iron, Middle Ages, Renaissance, Industrial, and the Information Age. The Paleolithic Age, sometimes the Old Stone Age, and its time period was anywhere from about 500,000 BC to about 10,000 BC. So you're talking, roughly half a million years ago. So what were its major impacts? You had an improved diet. This is kind of the transition into hunter-gatherers instead of like more of a scavenging type, and enhanced security allowed for an increase in the human population. So what does that mean? By humans being able to create weapons, we were better protected against against the other creatures. Because when you think about it, human beings, when you compare human beings to most any other wild creature, we don't have a lot of good defenses. We're not that strong. We don't have sharp claws. We're not that fast. And so being able to protect ourselves using tools gave us a tremendous advantage over the other animals, which allowed us then to grow. So some of the artifacts, stone axes, bone needles, hearth sites, stuff that shows that we were coming together as groups. Then we have the Mesolithic, and meso meaning kind of middle, and the middle Stone Age. This is between about 10,000 BC and about 4,000 BC. So gradual domestication of animals. So now we're not just going out and hunting for food. We're actually able to care for food and raise that food. Agriculture led to settled communities. So we're not having to travel as much to go and find our food. So we're getting into leather work, fishing tackle. So we're creating fishing line, fishing hooks, more stone circles. Now we're getting into the Neolithic, the New Stone Age. This is where, at least in my mind, and when I talk to my friends, when I start talking about early human history, the mind tends to start moving into these. So what came around? Dependable year-round food supply, division of labor. So not every person had to be able to do everything on their own, but instead you had more specialized. Groups. This would be, instead of hunter-gatherers, you would have fishermen, and you would have farmers, and you would have hunters, and that kind of thing when it came to resources for food, let alone all of the other things that are available. Specialization that spurred invention. So it used to be, you caught a fish. You would go to the river, you would catch a fish, and if you caught a fish, you got to eat, you got to live another day. When specialization came along, so there were people who were specialized in fishing. That requires tools, and because you needed to be able to catch enough fish, not just for you, but for others. And so the idea of fishing nets, and I'm not sure exactly when they came around, but boats or boat type crafts, that way you could go further out into the water, were created because the specialization drove that need. Necessity is the mother of invention, and so wherever there is a need, people will come up with things to in order to meet that need. So some of the things that we've seen from this, spinning and weaving tools. So, we're talking about better types of clothing, stone plows and sickles. So stone plows, there's your gardening, more farming, agricultural industry. Now we're moving into the Neolithic Age, and this is where, at least in my mind, I would say engineering truly started to take off. So Mesopotamian engineers used clay tablets to document irrigation systems. So we're talking about, writing and history, record keeping. Babylonian engineers used mathematical concepts such as algebra for land excavation calculations. Algebra is not something that somebody just sat down. I used to teach math, and I'd hear this all the time. Mr. Andrews, who invented math? Lots of people. Because math is in its own way, depending on your viewpoint, a technology. It's something that also evolved. Algebra didn't just pop up one day. It was something that people experimented with the idea and created. The most famous artifact from the Neolithic age would be the Egyptian pyramids. Then you run into the Bronze Age, architectural period that included combining copper and tin to produce bronze. So we knew about copper, we knew about tin, but now we could create an alloy. We could mix them together and create a new material. This is from about 2300 BC to 700 BC. The use of bronze was, you could replace the stone tools, and So you created more efficient tools, which allowed humans to greatly alter their environment. And so now we have, bronze. Now we have different kinds of jewelry and tools and weapons. From the Bronze Age, we move into the Iron Age. Iron was a harder material to extract. It wasn't. It's a little bit harder to find than say, for instance, copper. So the architectural period marked by the prevalent use of iron or steel, which steel is an iron alloy. This is from about 700 BC to 450 AD. Military dominance. I kind of hinted at this without saying it. Military dominance for cultures that could produce iron weapons. If your technology advanced faster than your neighbors, that gives you an advantage over your neighbors and allows you to do what you want as a culture. So the countries or the cultures, the societies, the empires that were able to produce iron weapons and iron defenses were better than those who were still, dealing with bronze and rocks. Iron-bladed plows allowed humans to increase food productions. They were just better than stone or bronze. Iron farming equipment, weapons, manuscripts. Again, more documentation. And now we get into the Iron Age. We get into the Iron Age. We're already in the Iron Age, but just more examples of engineering design during the Iron Age. Greek engineers created a crossbow and a catapult to conquer the territories. The crossbow, is evolved from the longbow, and the longbow had evolved. Not sure on this one, but I want to say it came, as an evolution from the spear, but not 100% certain on that one. But the crossbow at the time was had a lot more power to it than just the traditional longbow. Of course, now we have compound bows, which are even more powerful, and which came from combining ideas of the longbow and then the crossbow. Catapults. There had been methods that used to be way back in the Mesolithic or Paleolithic era. You would literally throw big rocks. You'd have these really big guys that would throw big rocks. But by now in the Iron Age, you have a device that can throw the rocks for you, and that can throw rocks that are larger than any single man could throw. Again, this is military dominance, and so you could give your influence onto the world. And one of the references is the Roman Empire. It was once said that the sun never sets on the Roman Empire because they had conquered so much of the planet. Roman engineers created aqueduct systems, sanitary systems, and extensive road systems. The sanitary systems, if you're talking about being able to transport water, everybody could have water, everybody could be cleaner, and so people would be healthier. The extensive road systems, that makes travel easier. So people can get from one place to another a whole lot easier now than they used to. They would have roads where they could travel instead of having to follow trails path or just navigate on their own. Move into the Middle Ages, and so this is after the fall of the Roman Empire. You have three kind of periods within the Middle Ages, which is the early, the high, and the late. So the time period is between approximately 450 AD and 1400 AD. There's two things that happen here. The first is better record keeping, so that's part of why we can divide subdivide this into more categories, but then also technology is advancing faster and faster. Early Middle Ages, increased pressure from invasion led to depopulation and deurbanization. Now that's kind of um, an instance where technology does something that you don't necessarily want to have happen. And so people kind of became more scattered for a while. And high Middle Ages, beginning of feudalism, population increase, so population starts to rebound again, in agricultural innovation. We're getting better at farming. We're getting better at giving supplies, goods and supplies, to different people. Then you get into the late Middle Ages, kind of the end of what we would call the Middle Ages, where there's lots of different kinds of famine, plagues. There's lots of war. Whenever there's famine and plagues, there's lack of resources. There's often going to be war. The Black Death happened during the late Middle Ages. And this is very relevant to actually what's going on now. It killed approximately 1/3 of the entire population. There's a lot that's going on with the COVID currently, where they're still referencing things that happened during the Black Plague to make sure that everything that's going on with the COVID-19 does not happen in the way that it did with the Black Plague, or as they say here, the Black Death. So improved harnesses for horses, cast iron, cannons. Again, there's for much of history, the technological advances were military and weapons based. And because whoever had the better weapons had better control, mechanical clocks and compasses. So now it's easier to navigate. It's easier to tell time. Back in the Neolithic age, you had sundials, which were good, and the larger the sundial, the more accurate that you could tell time. But now we're talking about mechanical clocks, and which has eventually worked its way to clocks that you can wear on your wrist, and not only that, but anybody could afford them. Back in this age, mechanical clocks were very expensive, so only the wealthy, only the wealthy could afford something like a mechanical clock. Now we're talking about the Middle Ages. So technology like the windmill could help produce more efficient mechanical labor. With that, there were certain jobs that would have been lost during that time, and that is one of the downsides of technology. Any advancement in technology also replaces certain amounts of the workforce, and so the workforce always has to advance, and so skills have to advance as well. To keep up with the technology. The printing press was used to share information. So we've, at some point, and I don't remember exactly when, but we transitioned from scrolls, which would have been used in the Neolithic, to and tablets, to now we have books. But the printing press is now letting us, because it used to be every book had to be handwritten, and so now you could print. Instead of having one person write 100 books, you could have one person print, using the printing press, 100 books in a fraction of the time. So information became much more readily available for those who were able to read. And and the word engineer began to appear and I'm not even going to try and pronounce that because I don't know the background. I don't know what language this term came from, so I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'm just going to call it engineer. And it just means to design or to devise. But key thing in here, design or devise, this doesn't mean you're just guessing checking. You're going into it already having pre-existing knowledge. Now we get into the Renaissance, or the Age of Enlightenment. It's marked by classical influence, sharing ideas, and it means to be reborn. So this is from 1400 to 1750 AD. Now you're getting into colonial American history at this point. When these things are starting to happen. So we're now better able to observe and quantify natural phenomena. So these things that used to have just myths that existed to explain them, now we're able to look at in terms of a scientific manner and a scientific approach. Telescope was invented. Microscope was invented. Thermometer, stuff that we very much use today, was invented during this this era. So probably the number one Renaissance engineer is Leonardo da Vinci. He was born in Italy in 1452 and began his career as an artist, painting and sculpting. But he also, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, he designed weapons. He did design buildings, machinery. He had flying machines that the Wright brothers used to kind of model some of their designs. I actually got to see the Da Vinci Codex when it was in Raleigh several years ago, and I mean it's just incredible to think that somebody back in 1500-esque was able to think through and design these things. It was absolutely amazing. So some examples, another very famous person from the Renaissance era, Galileo Galilei, born in 1564. He was a physicist, astronomer. That's where I know him the most from, and philosopher. He made improvements to the telescopes and, lots of astronomical observations. He had the sun-centric model, because before then, most people believed that Earth was the center, not even the center of our solar system, but the center of our universe. And it was through his observations that he was able to determine with pretty good accuracy that the Earth was not the center, and was able to even go as far as to state that the Earth was the third planet away from the sun, instead of all these other planets revolving around Earth. Then we move into the industrial age, which is, as far as history is concerned, probably what we're most familiar with. So we get complex machinery, very complex machinery, factories, and urbanization. So Industrial Revolution gave rise to urban centers requiring vast municipal services, creating specialized and interdependent economic life. So people during this time period lost the ability to completely be self-sufficient and instead rely on other people who are specialized in their trades to be able to do their job, because your job had you doing one thing. By complex machines, we're talking about automotive, we're talking about, just motors in general. Aircraft would have come around during this time. So airplanes, one of my particular favorites. And if you think about it, if you know how to build an airplane, odds are you may know how to farm a little, but it would be really, you're exhausting a lot of energy to be able to build an airplane. Even if you know how to farm, you don't know how to be a doctor, so you're having to be dependent on other people for that existence. So that interdependence, what we call professionals. So just like I am a teacher, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an engineer, I'm not you name, I'm not a mechanic. And because I am somebody I am so specialized that I'm a professional in what I do. Massive population and expansion and improved standard of living. This is, as these technologies come out, I mentioned with the mechanical clocks, only the richest of the rich could afford a mechanical clock when they first came out. Now that technology has been around for a very long time, and so anybody can get a mechanical clock. But this improved standard of living is when these new technologies come out now, it doesn't take 40, 50 years for the price to get low enough to where the wealthy can afford it, and so somebody other than the super wealthy can afford it. But within 40 or 50 years, everybody not only has one, but it's outdated. So these new technological advances become much more affordable, much more quickly. So we have, during this time, we have electricity. I've mentioned some of these already. Electricity, automobile, airplane, radio, television, telephone, the rocket. Again, another, let's see here, automobile, electricity, airplane, radio. Well, actually, all of these have in some way impacted, like military dominance. And now we get to see the explanation. This is where engineering really starts coming into play, where we get to kind of understand a little bit better about what an engineer is. James Watt refines the steam engine for a more practical use. The steam engine had been around for a long time, but to use it for something for more common purposes, because it had been in the steam locomotives had been around for a while, but the idea of being able to consolidate it into something like a car was unheard of. Alessandro Volta discovers the principles for a battery. So now you can have electricity in the palm of your hand instead of having, only certain people being able to have it. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the last name of this person, but it's Peter. Creates the forerunner to the capacitor. So capacitors are used in electronics all the time. And Henry Ford creates the concept of the modern assembly line. So instead of having to have people move from place to place to work on stuff, you just take the object that needs to be worked on, you send it on down the line in order of the people who need to work on it. And that made things much more efficient in being able to manufacture a product and get it out to be sold in a much better amount of time. This is the Model T Ford that came out. And then finally, we're in our era, the current, which is the information age. So information sharing, gathering, manipulation, and retrieval. There's a lot of arguments about things within the information age, but information has always been an extremely powerful tool, and now everybody has the world of information at their fingertips, and even more now so than ever. If you have a cell phone, you have access to more information within an instant, within a less than 1 second search in Google. You have access to more information than I did in an entire encyclopedia set when I was a kid. So, the amount of information that you have at your disposal is just incredible. And so what are some things that we have now? Digital cameras, integrated circuits, computer, nuclear powers, just all of these things. So much has changed in a relatively short amount of time. So we're going to look at these in more detail. And I say you're going to look at these in more detail, during these upcoming days. And so I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you need to, you can go back and you can take notes on anything that you missed. And look forward to hearing from you in the next one.